All right, folks, so today we're going to be doing a couple do's and don'ts if you're buying a used vehicle. Now, this isn't a bucket list. So when I say bucket list, I mean like a bucket of cash car you would buy for maybe $2,000-$3,000 or even less. No, we're talking about financing a car. So if you're balling on a budget and you want to buy a vehicle, these are just some things that come to mind for me. This is just my opinion. Definitely ask around, but I think this is solid advice. I've bought 5 cars from dealers, so I don't have like a ton of experience, but I've ran into some do's and don'ts in my personal life and with friends. So with that being said, let's get started. So one of the first things I would say is, and these are in no order of importance, do buy a mid-sized car. So a lot of times when you go to dealerships, and you're looking at pricing, you're like, I have this budget, and that's completely respectable. Before you even get to the dealership, you need to know what you can afford. So I guess I should backtrack a little bit. So this is point -1. So you need to know what you can afford and understand what kind of interest rate you can get. So go to your bank, check that out. Go to your credit union, check that out. And see what you can finance, because a lot of times when you go to dealerships, they'll say, hey, what payments can you afford? And they'll throw like extra stuff in there, or they'll make the loan 10 years long when you only, really, if you can do 3 or 4, that'd be ideal, but I wouldn't go past 5. If you find you need to save up a little more just to get into a monthly range that you're comfortable with or that fits your budget, do that. But back to my first point, buy a mid-sized car. And I say that for 2 main reasons. Number 1, the resale and will be easier with that. It'll be a higher resale value. And then number 2 is that manufacturers typically put more into their mid-sized cars. Now, Toyota and Mazda are like exceptions, but I would say, with Kia and Nissan and other brands, when you get the smaller cars, you just don't get the amenities. And even with Volkswagen. So I had a Passat, and then I went to a Jetta, and I noticed that it didn't have auto dimming headlights. It didn't have puddle lights on the door. Just several other things like I didn't have a standard power seat in my Jetta. Just little amenities like that really add up and make the car just more livable. Like I said, with Mazda and Toyota, they're going to put quality in all their cars. But even with them, I would still recommend buying a mid-sized car just because, it's a safer car. And nowadays cars are pretty good on fuel. This has a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder. So does this, or maybe a 2.4 liter. So you're not saving that much in gas. Just to give you perspective, when I had my Passat, it had a 2.5-liter 5-cylinder engine, and I drove it from Oklahoma to North Carolina. I averaged 34 miles to the gallon. I did the same trip with my Jetta and averaged 36 miles to the gallon. Not a big difference. In city driving, it may be a bit greater, but again, guys, especially if you're looking at Chevy or some domestic brands, these cars a lot of times are throwaway cars. With Volkswagen, Mazda, Toyota, not so much. They sell high volume on their small cars. These are just cheap cars that, if you have to get in a small car, I would say get a Nissan Versa, or really an Altima. And those are going to be a little bit better to me, engine-wise than a Kia or Hyundai. And you'll have less complications than a Volkswagen, which is going to have more maintenance. And point number 2 is that, and this one's going to be a tough one, buy a car with a naturally aspirated engine if you have the option. Like this Toyota right here has a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder engine, and it's not turbocharged, it's not direct injection. And if you look up, Savage Geese has a video about direct injection. So if you can avoid it, do that. And then turbos, avoid them. They're just more complicated. Now, most modern cars, or a lot of modern cars, are going to have turbocharged engines. But if you reach back a little bit, maybe 7-8 years on the Toyota Camry, and even old Honda Accords. I don't have an example here, but like a 2011, 2010, 2013 Honda Accord, because a lot of times you're not going to be able to find a finance car at some dealerships that are over 10 years old they tend to not want to sell those. Even with Ford, if you have an option, if you're looking at a Ford Taurus, I would say get the naturally aspirated V6. I'm not going to hate on domestic versus Japanese versus, German or European cars, but I would say, with these manufacturers, just it's worth it. Like, the fuel economy is not that much greater. I'll mention this with my Jetta, like the 2.5 liter Jettas versus the 1.8 liter turbos. The fuel economy is not that much better. The power's a little bit better with the turbo, but to me, I'd rather have the 2.5 liter, but it's just hard to find a 2013 Jetta, 2012 with lower miles in good condition. Same thing with these Corollas. I'm not super familiar with these cars, but, along the lines of the turbo, I would say, let me walk this back and say less complicated. So if you get a turbo, I would not get a turbo with the CVT. It's just a lot of complications. Even with Toyota, I mean, they make quality vehicles, but, CVT transmissions are just not as solid as traditional automatic transmissions. And I would say if you're going to get, I'm throwing a lot of little sub points in here. If you have to get a Honda, a Hyundai, or a Kia, I would do the Elantra over a Kia Soul any day, just because I've seen these last longer than Kia Souls more traditionally on the road. I mean, Kia Souls were, to me, a bit popular back in the day, but you see these Elantras on the road a lot longer. I had a neighbor that bought 2 of them. I don't trust the engines, and the interiors don't hold up as well to me as like Mazda, Toyota, or Honda, or even domestic makes, I would say. So there's that. No CVTs, no turbos, and don't do direct injection if you can avoid it. Modern cars are going to have more sensors, so I'll put a little asterisk at this point. They are going to have a lot more sensors. You can't avoid that. If you have crash detection, forward collision warning, rear cross traffic alerts, those things are going to happen. Like, you're just going to have to deal with that. But just adding complications unnecessarily is a very, very bad idea. And so this takes me to my third point. Modern cars cost more to maintain. What I mentioned in the last point, it's hard to find a non-turbocharged engine in new cars, especially 2023. Like Toyota and Honda, they're pretty much in for that. Hyundai, Kia, turbocharging everything. So, maybe get a couple years back to get a traditional naturally aspirated engine, one, and then just make sure you're not at the tip top of your budget, because oil changes, a lot of these turbos or these high compression engines require synthetic fuel. A lot of them can gunk up, and there's recommended kind of cleanings for those at like 80, 75,000 miles. If you get stuck with a CVT, it may need the fluid changed, more frequently, just to make sure it doesn't blow up, because I assume you're not going to be switching cars every 4 or 5 years. So these are things to consider when you're balling on a budget. Just understand, one of the pluses of modern cars is that oil change lasts longer. So now, in the past, they would do a 3,000 mile recommendation. Now you can go 5,000 miles. Just get full synthetic oil changes. Some vehicles have changed the coolant type that they have. That costs more. You have big wheels, and so you have lower profile tires. Those are going to run out faster. Most cars today have bigger wheels. Back in the day, you could get $50 tires, but now you can't even get a Civic that has, wheels that are under 15 inches. Every car has massive rims and wheels. And so just understand that. And I know the SUV craze is going on, but understand tires are going to cost more on SUVs. They're not going to get as good a gas mileage. And just understand, is there utility here? Would you get more utility out of something like this or a Chevy Malibu? I know they don't make it anymore, but I think it's the same space and volume. Some people feel safer in these, but are you really? And I guess one other sub point, in talking about modern cars just costing more, they do save you in some aspects. Like I said, the oil changes go a little bit longer. And then I've noticed when I got my Jetta, it has some safety features, forward collision warning, and on its rear cross traffic alert, it'll actually brake for you. That has impacted my insurance. My insurance is a bit lower just because of the features that it has on it. So I'm fortunate for that. I'm grateful for that. And it saved me from wrecking about 4 or 5 times with the forward collision warning and even the cross traffic. So, there are some savings to be had, but also you want to check your insurance just to make sure. If you have a ton of complications, it could help. It could make the insurance go up if the bumper has 30 sensors in it. So, all right, and then my final point for this video, and I might make a bit more of a detailed video, do not buy a used luxury car. So I've seen in the past, and I've had the temptation to do this myself. You have a budget and you're like, ooh, I can afford this car. So oftentimes, these cars can be a lot less than you think they are. I mean, they look really good, but there are several trade-offs that you'll find when buying a used luxury car. So they age more gracefully, so you'll look at them and you can't tell how old they are. So instead of getting a 4 or 5-year-old car, you're getting a 7 or 8-year-old luxury car. So it's an older vehicle. People can't tell, and you get street cred with it. But then also, it has higher mileage on it. I've seen people, instead of getting 50, 60, or 50 or less thousand miles, they'll get something with 80, 90, over 100 to get in a luxury vehicle, to have a certain look. And I get it, but at the same time, those are unnecessary risk. And these vehicles, even if they don't break down, these service requirements on them for them to continue to run optimally are great. Like, you can ride a Toyota without changing the oil for a bit longer. You can abuse some of those cars. Mercedes is not going to take that kind of abuse. When sensors go out, the cars can get immobilized. That is a big, big risk with luxury cars. If certain sensors, in the engine, or it doesn't even have to be something you did wrong, but if something goes wrong, it can go into limp mode and may just be stuck in second gear. And you're going to be out of luck. You're going to have to go to a dealership. You can't tow it to your local mechanic because they don't have the tools and the diagnostic equipment to be able to see what's going on. So please be aware of that. Oil changes, a lot more expensive. Massive tires, a lot more expensive. Dealer exclusive, brand exclusive things that you have to get. Even windshield wipers are going to be more expensive. These cars, they ride well, but it comes at a cost. So if you absolutely have to have a luxury vehicle, I would say go Acura or Infiniti. I would not do an Audi. You could do a Cadillac, but again, it's going to be a lot more of a headache if something goes wrong. All right, guys, on top of that, insurance costs. So a lot of times you'll have a budget and you'll just be thinking, well, my insurance will be the same as it was before I got this new car. No, as soon as you put in the VIN for this Audi A6, they are going to quote you $200-300, or they're going to quote you, a lot more than what you're currently paying. And so I, at one time, had a bad driving record, and I was paying $220 a month for insurance. Now, I had full coverage, but it wasn't even a luxury car. So, when I was getting my next car, I was plugging the information into my insurance company's website just to see, because I had some tickets and things that I had to put some distance on. So just be mindful of that. And again, these cars are very nice, very svelte. This Audi right here looks very good. This is a 2016. It's a 7-year-old car, but if you told me it was a 2020, I believe you. This is a very, very good looking vehicle. All right, guys, for instance, this 2017 Audi A6 Premium is $24,000. It is a mid-sized 4-door car. Looks really, really good. That is not a bad price at all. I mean, a lot of these SUVs are like 30 plus used. This is a very, very good looking car. Same with that Audi. That cost of entry is reasonable. Like, that's a reasonable price. You could potentially get this if you have decent credit. Let's take a look. At $23,000 at 5%, if you have good credit, your payments are $386. Fair $469. I'm gonna say $469. That's gonna be a bit of a stretch. That's quite a difference. So if your credit is not good, understand you may need to hop in. And I know I said don't get into smaller cars, but you may need to hop into a Honda Civic or a Nissan Sentra. These are not bad cars. I'm just saying, like, if I wanted this Audi, for instance, and my credit was bad, like, I'm not gonna pay like that's basically the cost of your insurance, like $140, $50 more because of my credit. I'm just gonna have to sacrifice maybe for 4 or 5 years and get this Nissan Sentra. And what I can do with that is save on insurance and save on monthly costs and put those savings in a savings account. And then when it's time to get the Audi, hopefully my credit will be better. I've made some wiser decisions. I've paid down some debt, maybe caught some things up. And then you can get into the Audi for, you'll have less debt. Maybe $400 a month won't be such a burden to you because they're probably not going to be the same price in 4 or 5 years. But still, these are choices you may have to make. But if you're insecure, getting that Audi and then the girl, but once you guys get serious and she sees you're overtaxed with the Audi, what's that going to look like? So just be mindful. Yeah, you don't have the street cred. Yeah, your friends are going to be like, hey, we want to ride in Joe's car. He's got the Audi. But understand, you're going to be better off. You have to prioritize yourself. And when you're buying a car, you can't buy it for others. You have to get it for yourself. So, yeah. And then also, like I said, if this is the only car you can afford, and you're like, hey, I really want a midsize, then just wait 6 months or a year, get another $2,000-$3,000 together, because that's probably the difference in price between the Sentra and the Altima. Now, these vehicles do have CVTs. I have a friend with a 2015. Hers is going strong at 90,000 miles. So it doesn't jerk, but I understand that's a risk. Honestly, I feel like the Nissan Altima is an acceptable risk. It's not a super heavy car. You're not demanding, a larger midsize SUV's weight to be pulled by the CVT. But some people, if you have a family and you're really tight, that may not be something you want to do. I would recommend getting, instead of these 2017, I'd recommend probably getting like a 2015 Accord at the same price. So these are decisions you have to make. It's kind of like, I don't know, buying a car, I feel like a lot of times is like getting married. Like, a lot of times people want to have this dream wedding, but it's like there's life after the wedding. So if you spend $200K in the wedding and you're paying that off, you can't get the house, she can't get a new car, you guys can't do this or that, put the kids in this school that you want. So there are things you may have to sacrifice for a greater good. It's not that you're like compromising yourself, but it's for a greater good. But if you have to have something, and you just need to understand the cost.